looking at a couple of black screens and a few beautiful faces. So at least the faces are there and some of you moving around. That makes me happy. All right, so without further ado, I'm Michelle Moreno. I'm the team leader now at the Tampa Properties Office. I have been an active agent in real estate since 2014. I like to call it a team, yet it's myself and my husband. So really it's my husband who has taken over our team. Our team historically sells about 30 units a year. It's big enough. That's as big as we want it to be. And that's all he can handle right now. And promise, that's all I can handle because I'm here all day. And then I have his questions all night because he's still a new agent. So he was lucky and got into the business and inherited a business that rolls about 30 units a year. And all he has to do is keep that up. And so training all the time, that's my life, and I'm happy to do it. So what I did, I came back, my background is military. I was in for 27 years and I came into real estate wanting to teach and coach. And they told me in order to do that, I had to cut my teeth on the business. So that's what I did. And now I'm able to do what my passion is, and that's pouring into others and helping you get where you need to be in your goals. So as part of that, I will take classes every now and then that have nothing to do with what I want to learn, but what I want to learn for you. And so I just took a negotiating class and I learned a lot of great things, and there's a little bit of experience behind some of these things, but I wanted to share what I learned in the class and some real life experience and hope that we all share together some of our experiences with negotiation, because this is one area that no matter how experienced you are, you're still going to come up with that, hey, have you ever had this scenario, right? It happens, at least for us, on almost every single transaction. We learn something new. In fact, that's one of our goals, is after each transaction to write down something that we learned or that we can improve on for the next time. So I encourage you to do that too, because sometimes you learn the same lesson more than once, and my goal is never to learn something more than one time. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, and I'm trying to watch the chat and all of that too, so just bear with me. And I'm going to show you the slides now. They're not beautiful, okay? I finished the course last night because I'm a procrastinator like everybody else. And I put them together on a slideshow this morning, so they're not my beautiful Keller Williams slide, and they're still going to get the point across. All right, so the Negotiator's Playbook, that's what they call it. Really, it's an acronym, POWER, and this is to get ready to negotiate, is to prepare, open your positions, working with effective arguments and trade-offs, effecting compromises, and then the R is reaching and documenting agreements on a win-win note for the client. So I like the win-win, right? Because that's one of our Y4C2Ts, is win-win or no deal. So we're going to be talking about each of these as we go along. So what's the goal? Is assessing the statistical probability of success. And the things you need to know before you're going to go into negotiation is the market with you or against you? Are you working in a buyer's market or a seller's market? That's going to probably let you know which way you need to go when you're getting into negotiations with the other client. And oh, by the way, do you think you negotiate with your clients? Oh yeah, you're negotiating not just with the other agent, but you negotiate things with your own clients. So we're going to talk about all that. Does your client love it or like it? This is a great tactic. I like to tell my clients when we're showing property is, okay, I talk to them like my husband talks to me when we're going to buy a car. I need to know if you like this house or you love it, but they don't need to know that. You just need to tell me. I need to know my negotiation power, right? So we need to know, do they just like the house or do they love it? Are there competing offers, right? Are we seeing that now? Are we seeing competing offers in this market? Shake your head like this. Because most properties that are priced under $500,000 are getting multiple offers. And I'm getting feedback from some agents that even houses in the 500, 600, 700 range are receiving multiple offers. We have a $1 million listing in South Tampa. And because of that location, we have also received multiple offers. So we're definitely in that market of multiple and competing offers. Does the other negotiator have a competing offer? That's kind of the same as number 3, so I don't know why they're separate. And do you know the other agent? If your history is favorable or not, why do you think that would make a difference in negotiating? Yeah, I'm a two-way kind of person, so you're going to have to talk to me.
Well, I mean, I kind of think it sets a precedent for the basis of that relationship that you have with the other agent. You know, are you going to be able to, are you already starting at that center point with that other person? Or is there already emotion involved?
Exactly. Is there history with that other agent, right? I mean, for any of us doing business for any amount of time, I can promise you that the agent on the other side is not always a highly trained, highly motivated Keller Williams agent. If they were, everything would be wonderful, and they're not. And we get to deal with all different types of personalities. So do you think over a course of 10 or 15, 20 years in the business, you may learn how other agents are and what they do, right? Do you think there are bullies out there? Oh yes, there's a ton of bullies out there. There are a ton of new agents who don't know how to negotiate, right? And do you think there are some experienced agents that might take advantage of that? Yep, shake your head up and down. That's exactly what happens. So if you have a personal experience with an agent, or even if the seller has a personal experience, maybe that was an agent they used prior, that could definitely play into how we're going to negotiate a contract with them. Or even it could influence how we recommend to our buyer or seller. We're not supposed to tell them anything about the other side, yet do you think there are some agents going, oh my gosh, we got 3 offers, and let me tell you what, this agent right here is going to be a bear to deal with. Do you think there's agents out there saying that? Yeah, there are. Should there be? No. We're supposed to be professionals. We're supposed to present the offer, and we're supposed to negotiate as if we have none of that information, and we're human. So that's going to play in there. Are the parties motivated to buy or sell? There's nothing more frustrating than to try to sell a property where you have not one motivated party, right? You have a seller who says, I'm not in a rush, I don't want to give my house away. And you have a buyer who's like, la-di-da, I'm not in a rush either. I want to move up into a bigger house, but if I don't find the perfect house, it's not a big deal. So we need to know the motivations so we know where we stand with negotiation. So there are different types of negotiations, and some of these slides I'm going to touch on and we're going to go because I copied most of them and we don't need to dive deep on all of them. So one of the formats is the competitive format, right? And are agents typically competitive? Yeah, most of us get into this business because we're salespeople and we're very competitive. And so you have this competitive format where it's a win-lose and lose-win, depending on the market and the probability of success, right? You're going to have those agents that are like, it's all about me, it's all about my client. We want to have our needs met, and we don't care about the buyer and their needs. That's not really a good scenario for anyone, but there are scenarios out there. You potentially would win if the market's on your side, and you would lose if the market is against you, right? Beating the odds requires skill, information, and a clear understanding of how to play your hand. Outcomes can change when info is leveraged and strategies, tactics are used appropriately. What I see a lot of this in the win-lose format is newer agents that just are going out there and I want to win for my clients. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that's usually what happens. And what I have to do is slow them down and say, what's more important to you, getting the house for your client or being right? Because many times it's us, right? It's us. I want to win this for my client because I'm competitive. I want to win. I want to get the deal. And we don't really think about what's best for our client and what's right for them. And so I'm oftentimes slowing agents down, saying, slow down. What's more important, you being right with this other agent or you getting this deal for your buyer? Because depending on your answer is how I'm gonna help coach you, right? So what should our answer always be? What's best for our client, right? Whatever's best for our client. We have to take our ego out of negotiation. It's always about what's best for our client. So now we have the organizational format, which is a corporate structure where negotiations occur without the negotiator's knowledge. This doesn't really happen that often in real estate, but the example they have here is a co-broke agent calls the office to book an appointment for a property, and the person answering the phone says, "Thank God someone wants to see that." That's kind of showing your hand before you even get involved, right? That's surrounding yourself with the right people, making sure people who answer phones for you are trained properly with the right scripts. Oh, that's a great property. Everybody's calling on that, right? I can't have my husband knowing that we have this listing that's sitting there forever and for him to say on the phone when somebody calls, "Oh, thank God you're calling. We need to sell this. Make an offer, show it fast." Right? We can't have that. And so that's what this one is talking about. When somebody else kind of negotiates on your behalf without you even knowing or having a chance to get in there, they've said the wrong thing. We don't usually have to deal with much of that. The competitive format of lose-lose is the split the difference. So the problem with this format is when you're splitting the difference for whatever it is, if both sides aren't happy, you really didn't do your job. And again, this is when we're thinking without consulting with our clients. We're deciding on their behalf what's best for them. And that may not be what's best for them. So this is showing only untrained players believe it's a good idea to split the difference. You never want to go in and be like, okay, listen, if we pay this much, my seller would be willing to do this. That's not our job. Our job is to know what their wants, needs, and desires are and negotiate on their behalf with their motivation and what they want. If compromise occurs early during the offer acceptance phase, the deal has a higher probability of falling apart later. That's key, because if you give up too much up front, you're teaching the other side how to treat you. And so if you're so easily giving up concessions for your seller or your buyer, that's telling an experienced agent on the other side, oh, they're a pushover, they're going to be easy, we could just ask for whatever we want. And there's more of a probability of the deal falling apart. I'm not saying be a stickler up front. I'm saying don't show all your cards all up front. Be professional, be friendly, don't be a pushover. Clients may expect the agent to contribute since they conceded early on to put the deal together. What does that mean?
Money out of our pocket.
Oh yeah.
Commission contribution.
That's where you're going to have the talk about commission. If you are trying to talk your seller into lowering a price, or trying to talk the buyer into paying more for something they're not ready for, and issues during the transaction occur, they're more likely going to start looking to you to start kicking in contribution to repairs or giving up your commission because you were not a strong negotiator up front. And we don't want that, right? We don't want to have to give up our commission for anything. And then it only gets worse from that point forward. So what we do want is partnering format for a win-win. And that is when concessions are made on minor items, it causes little distress. So the win-win format generally results in completed transactions where the clients are satisfied and nobody blames anybody. That's what we ultimately want, right? We want our clients happy, everybody's happy, then it's a win-win. The relationship with the co-broke agent remains intact, and any concessions made are generally only minor items. I don't want to work with somebody where my seller has to give up everything and they're not willing to give up anything, right? We don't want that kind of relationship. So it's important to realize a win-win is just a perception, not necessarily a reality. But if the clients are happy, it's a win-win. So again, if we think they got a raw deal, but they're happy, it's a win, okay? And I'm saying this because I have agents that will come and say, listen, my clients want to write this offer. And I did the comps, and the comps say the house is worth 200, but they have it listed for 225. And my buyers want to buy the house, but I'm trying to tell them it's too high. And my first question is always, are there multiple offers? Yeah, there are multiple offers. Okay, is it more important for you to be right or for your client to have the house they want? you know, this particular agent was very offended. She's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you're very passionate about this, and I get that. And it could very well be overpriced, but is that what you're trying to prove? By losing the deal for your client, you're going to prove what? By losing the deal for your client, you're proving that you're not in it for their interest. If they want that house and they told her, I want that house, I want to compete, then your job is to go in there, protect them as best you can with what? An appraisal contingency, and make that offer and get them in the door to the house that they want. It's not about our ego. And even if they wind up paying more for the house than you feel is the market value and it appraises and your buyers are happy, then was it a win? Yeah, it's a win. If your buyer's happy, it's a win. If your seller's happy, it's a win. It doesn't matter how you personally feel about what they're paying for or what they conceded to. Okay? You just have to really, really have that in your mind that you are representing your buyer and seller. You're not making decisions for them. So this is a lose-lose situation, is the split the difference. Sorry, this slide should have been over there. An example of that is when you're making compromises on major concessions and you can leave a lot of money on the table. So this is when parties are not satisfied at the end, right? This is when your buyer says, I should have asked for that extra 4%, or I should have asked for that washer and dryer in the contract. Now I'm out and I have to spend $1,500 on that. Or when your seller says, I should have never let anybody talk me into paying 3% closing costs, right? They had $50,000 to put down. Why did I concede to that? These are the kinds of things that if you're just negotiating without consulting with anybody, which we should never be doing, but it happens out there, you're not working on the best interest of your buyer or your seller. You're just trying to split the difference to make a deal, and that's not what we're supposed to do.
Jason's trying to get into yours. Who? Jason, he was in but got off onto another thing.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Sorry, guys. I have to let somebody in. Oh, admit all. Oh, my goodness. There we go. We had 3 more people. Sorry, guys. I'm learning how to keep things up in the corner. Okay. So if compromise occurs early, it has a prior of falling apart. This is why I put the slide back in, is because it only gets worse, and I'm sorry that you see this twice. All right. Win-win scenario. We already talked about that. Okay, so the personal format, we want you to do things based on their personal needs, wants, and wishes, not just of your people, but the other person and their side. The goal is to establish a firm foundation of collaboration for a win-win result. If the ego is insulted, you may lose the chance to secure the interests of the clients. When do you think we see that?
When somebody has asking for too much terms.
Okay, well, I get what I asked for. I'm sorry, you echoed. Can you repeat that again?
Maybe when somebody's giving a lowball offer that's way low, or asking too much in their terms of the contracted offer.
Right, exactly. So this happens quite a bit if you have a seller, for example, who has their property listed at a certain amount, and then somebody comes in with a very low offer. This is part of our getting prepared, right? Because if I know that I priced the property correctly and another agent submits what we consider a lowball offer, oftentimes the sellers, their ego gets hurt and they don't even want to respond. And that's where we need to know our market statistics, right? Because if I list a property and I say the average list to sell price is 98%, and I'm telling my seller, so Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if we price correctly, we should expect to receive an offer of about 98% of the list price. Well, imagine their surprise and insult when they price correctly and somebody comes in and undercuts 10, 20, 30, in the case of the $1 million listing, 100,000 below asking price. many sellers will say, I'm not even going to respond to that. So how can we stop that? Well, we're not saying do verbal negotiation. That's not it. But if you get your negotiation and your permission from sellers early on, for example, and they'll talk about the slides later. For example, I know when I'm listing a property, I already know what's their bottom line. What is the least amount they're going to accept for this house? I know what they're willing to give with the offer and without, and I know what price point that happens. So for example, I'll say you have a great washer and dryer here, it's top of the line. Does that convey? Well, it depends on the offer. Okay, let's talk about that. What does the offer have to be for you to include this? Right, and the reason I'm asking is because I want to know ahead of time, what is my negotiation power? And I want permission from them up front to be able to negotiate on their behalf so that I can only bring them offers that meet their criteria. When you have a great conversation with your sellers and your buyers, and you know exactly what their cutoff is, what they're including, what their wants, needs, and desires are, what's their motivation, and how fast do they need to close, and all of the terms of a contract, and you ask for their permission to negotiate on their behalf up front, explaining that I'm still going to present everything to you. Yet if I get an agent on the other side who calls to test it out and say, hey, we're thinking about writing an offer, how are your sellers feeling? I can say to them, especially with my $1 million listing, I have the authority to say to that agent, listen, if you're going to write me an offer and it begins with anything other than a 1, don't bother. Right? Don't bother. So they have allowed me to do that because we had 3 offers starting with a 9 that they would not even acknowledge. Right? We're listed at $1,050,000. That was on purpose. There's a little bit of leeway, but they want something over $1 million. And we got 3 offers in the 9s. They wouldn't even respond. So I had to ask them permission. Can I just tell agents out there if it starts below a 1 not to bother? And they said, absolutely. And I said, okay, now I need to know when will everything convey? And they gave me a number. So now I know when a contract comes in, I can call that agent and be like, listen, I see that you're asking for this, this, and this, and I can tell you right now, they're going to counter unless you raise the price. So let's talk. Let's talk and get it out in the open so that we can make one nice deal, and let's get these people together. All right, so you have to ask questions, and you have to ask questions that don't have a yes or no answer, really. You need to really dig down so you understand what their needs, wants, and desires are. And then the probability of success hinges on info about the interests of all parties, right? All parties need to know. You should be, as a buyer's agent, calling that listing agent and saying, what's a good closing date for your seller, right? Is that something that we have to fight about, or is that something that's flexible on one side and not flexible on the other? I mean, these are the meetings of the minds that you can have these conversations with these agents before an offer is even solidified. Some of the things I always call a listing agent for, if they're not kind enough to put it in the MLS, is, you know, what is the title company we're using? If they haven't said that they want an as-is or a standard contract, I ask that question, because if they don't care, I'm going to write the one I think is best for my buyer and seller after I consult with them and explain the difference between the two. I'm always going to ask them what their closing period is, what they think about a 10-day inspection period. You know, when does their seller need to move? Are they leaving the area? Are they staying? Are they going somewhere? Right? I'm going to ask as many questions as I can to see how I can write an offer for a win-win. I'm never trying to write an offer just for my client. I'm always trying to write that offer. My favorite is to submit an offer and have it accepted the way it is. Like, that's our goal on our team, is to not have to go back and forth. Let's submit an offer, let them accept it, and let's move on. That's the way we like to do business. There are people out there, though, and you have to know your client and their culture, that don't operate that way, right? Don't tell my husband one price. He will knit you and knit you and knit you until you agree to give him some kind of discount because he feels like he has to win something, right? That's not me, though. So if I have an agent and he has an agent, we have 2 different needs and wants. I want this done as quick as possible. High D, price it right, get what I can get, and let's get done. He's like, well, let's see. Let me see the numbers. Let's price it high. I want room for negotiation. What if they, that's him. So you need to know your clients so you know what kind of negotiating they're expecting you to do on their behalf. If I'm the type who doesn't like to negotiate and I just want to write one good offer, I have to explain myself to my client and see if that works for them. Because if they say to me, no, I'd rather put a little cushion in there, well, then I need to negotiate that cushion like it's my own money, even if I disagree, right? If I say it's worth 200, let's list it for 200 and get an auction and get people to go over. And he says, no, I'm gonna list it at 215. I am now deciding to list it at 215, and that's the best idea in the whole wide world because that's my client, right? And I'm gonna justify that listing price. It's all about the other negotiator and the ego. If they don't know how to pass the baton, it's going to be a difficult race, right? If you know their negotiating style, temperament, ego, and hot buttons, it can be a lot easier to cross that finish line, right? If you're dealing with a hothead on the other side, then it's probably better to do things email and send it written because they're getting too excited. They're getting too emotional, right? So you really do need to know the other side. So tell me something. How do you get to know the other agent if all you're doing is texting and emailing them? Yes, Jen, pick up the phone. That old-fashioned thing, it used to have a wire, but now it has this, right? You can actually talk on these things too. It's not just a texting machine or an email checker. I've tried it. I even used it this morning. You can press buttons and people are live on the other end. It's a miracle, really. We need to pick up the phone and talk to that other agent so we can hear them. Can you hear in my voice if I say, yeah, what's up? What can I do for you? What is that telling you?
That you're impatient and you really want to get off the phone.
Okay, that's already telling you either you're impatient or you're incredibly busy, right? You hear things that you can't hear or see through text and email. And so I always want to pick up the phone and introduce myself. Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm on the other end of the transaction. I just wanted to introduce myself so you hear my voice and so we can work together to get this deal to close. I want to hear how they respond to me because if they're rude, then I'm already clued in on how this transaction is going to go. If they're pleasant, I'm clued in on that. Right? I'm like, oh, this is going to be a smooth transaction. Right. So you need to pick up the phone and get to know who that agent is on the other side. So you know their temperament, because if you're dealing with me who's a high D and I'm talking to you real fast like this, if you talk to me in this kind of fashion, I'm doing like this on the other side. Like, come on, get it out. Right? I'm a high-paced person. So just like we teach you mirroring and matching with your clients, you need to do that with the other agent as well.
Everybody.
Right? I have to learn how to slow down when the other agent on the other side says, hey, yo, how you doing? How was your weekend? And I'm like, oh, which transaction are you calling me for? Just tell me that. Right? We have to slow down and we have to be able to cooperate with the other side. And that means we need to listen to them and mirror and match how they're talking to us. Just makes things go by a little easier. So the role of the negotiator and the ego, it's all about the other negotiator. Realize that most people who negotiate have never been trained and they don't know how to play the game. Right? How many of us have formal training in negotiations? No, up until I took that course, I didn't have any formal training. The first step is knowing how you'll take fair and ethical advantage for the benefit of your client without irritating or damaging the other negotiator's ego. Now, gentlemen, just bear with me for a minute. Women, how many of you are married? And how many of you, when you want your husband to do something, make it so that they think it was their idea? You shake your head, Jen, but we all do it, right? We do it. We all do it. In some way, fashion, or form, your kid wants something, dad said no, you're like, babe, let's just talk about this for a minute. Don't you think? And then it's their idea and they get to go tell the kids like they're the savior, right? We need to do that with our clients and with the other side as well. We want them to think that we're thinking about their best interest and their clients too, and come to that win-win. So if anybody's offended by that, I'm sorry, but I thought that was a great example of how you work with the other side. We want them, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, for real. I didn't realize I was unmuted.
Yeah, we want to do our best to make it a win-win, and it's easier because this is how they're saying, take fair and ethical advantage for the benefit of your client, right? It's fair and ethical. We don't undermine our husbands. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying sometimes my husband's go-to is no, right? His knee-jerk reaction, no. And every now and then I have to finagle and make it seem like he decided yes on his own. And I know I did it. But he did it, he made that decision and he's happy with it, he's owning it, right? We want them to own that decision. And so that's what we're talking about with the co-op agent. We want them to own maybe a recommendation we make. And hey, instead of closing concessions, what would your buyer think about a home warranty for those big ticket items? And maybe, you know, half of what they're asking for with closing. Is it the same amount of money? No. Would it benefit my client? Yes. Is it still going to benefit your client? Yes. So you want to come up with some kind of thing for the other side so that everybody's happy. More talking about the ego. Sometimes you need to agree to disagree, right? Now that happens in any kind of relationship, and we need to be able to say that because it's not always important for us to be right. It's more important for us to do what's right by our client, and every now and then, you have to put your hands up and say, you know what, we're just going to agree to disagree on this point right here. But that doesn't mean we can't continue to talk about the rest of it. We always have to respect the other person's side and opinion, right? They are protecting their client. The biggest issue I see out there is the fact that we are single agents and we have a way of protecting our clients that's different than a transaction broker. And every now and then I'll see them crossing their line, knowing that they're transaction brokers and have to step in there. Like, you know, have you had that conversation with your client? Because you're speaking right now as a single agent. And I'm just wondering, have you presented these ideas and these offers that we're making to your client, right? Sometimes I have to remind them because they're not doing that. They're acting from emotion instead of going to their client like we all should be. And you also, you know, sometimes you're going to get outdone, right? Sometimes the other side may win and you're going to be like, oh, wow, that was a really good point. I didn't see that coming, right? I didn't see them asking that question. I thought, especially when I was new, you know, the other side, the other savvy agents would like slip something in and I'd be like, oh, yeah, that was a good one. I'm going to write that down when I'm representing a buyer. I'm going to do that, right? And you have to admire that. Admire them for a job well done and learn from it. And we all know that cultivating relationships, whether it's your clients or the other agent, it's going to take time. It's going to be trust. And trust is not just handed out. It's earned, right? We like to say as agents that, we took all the courses. We're, licensed agents and people should automatically trust you. No, trust is earned. And that's for both sides of the deal. And, skill takes time. And then once you have enough positive interactions, you'll have more experience to go on and you'll feel more confident in this skill of negotiation. You have to understand what they want and what they need. And again, they're just going to keep harping on this. Subordinate your ego to attain the results. That's the biggest thing I see with agents. And I constantly have to say, what did your buyer or seller think? And it's always silence. And I'll say, so you're asking me how to proceed and you have not even presented it to your seller or your buyer. Well, it's just ridiculous, but that's not your choice, right? That's not your job. Your job is to present the offer as it is to your buyer or your seller and explain it to them to the best of you can't interpret things, but you can explain what the offer means, what that's going to have, what impact they may have, and then you let them decide, right? If the other person is a legend in their own mind, tact and diplomacy will be required. Okay, if you have not had the pleasure of having an agent on the other side of a transaction who thinks that they're the best thing since sliced bread, you are in for quite a treat when that actually happens, because it will. Especially agents who have been in the business for 112 years. They like to tell you that. And they like to let you know that they know everything there is to know about real estate, because they'll say things like, oh, honey, I've been doing real estate since you were in grammar school. Nice to know. All right. I've also had agents call me mommy. I don't know, last name, they assume I'm Spanish. They just assume mommy, mamita, and I have to be like, I'm sorry, it's either Michelle or Mrs. Moreno if you really want to go there, but don't call me mommy. We need to keep this professional. You know, you just have to be tactful, and the better you know your contract and your negotiating skills as you hone them, the easier it will be to deal with agents that are like that. On the other end of it, you may deal with an agent who has no idea what they're doing on the other side. Does that happen a lot? Oh yeah. Yeah, it happens quite a bit. For me, those are recruiting opportunities, right? They need our help in a bad way. So I'm going to help them through the transaction, and then I'm going to invite them to training, right? That's my thing. When I'm dealing with an agent on the other side who has no idea what they're doing, I am going to be the sweetest person in the world and walk them through. Because why? One, they're learning from me, and I know that they're at least learning right, and maybe in the future they won't make the same mistakes. And two, I'm the face of Keller Williams to that person. So I want them to know that we're all professionals, we're all highly trained, and we all treat each other with the utmost respect, right? So that's why I'm always going to treat them with diplomacy and be as nice as I can, whether they know what they're doing or they don't. And no matter what their abilities are, psychology is in play, right? Everybody has their own level of crazy, and we need to know what we're dealing with, right? You need to know who you're working with on the other side and where is their mind. What the negotiator needs, human nature is consistent. The other negotiator wants what anybody wants. We need to have our meaning. Results need to have meaning or matter, right? Everybody's results driven, especially in real estate. People want to be trusted and relied upon. And generally people want to be treated nice and be liked, right? James Shaw always says everybody wants to look good and be right. People need a good explanation to help defend the request. No one wants to be caught in a corner or given ultimatums. Nobody likes that. So we try not to do that. Most want recognition for results and be recognized as successful. We want to meet goals without violating our integrity. That's huge, you guys. You know, you never want to make somebody feel like they're compromising their integrity. Many of us don't like surprises or change in forms or procedures. So, you know, being under contract and finding out 2 months in that the person on the other side changed their loan from a conventional to an FHA, probably something I should have known earlier, right? Probably something we needed to know earlier. We don't like surprises. Everyone wants to be listened to without interruption. That's a hard one. It's difficult. We get excited, we get emotional. And when the other side says something we don't like, we want to talk on top of them. We want to be heard, and we need to take a step back and listen. 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? We need to listen some more before we talk. Yeah, some people want to be wined and dined. I'm not all about that. Everyone thinks they're honest, fair, and ethical. Who's going to say they're dishonest, right? If I'm with another agent on the other side, I'm going to be like, hey, can we just cut to the chase? Are you going to be like shady, or are you going to be honest with me, right? I wish we could do that. But generally, everybody thinks that they're fair, honest, and ethical. And I'm sure they're not planning to throw a hissy fit. It just kind of happens sometimes. And we want to avoid future risk. Most prefer to work easier, smarter, not harder. Okay. The deadly sins of negotiation are pretty much the same deadly sins, right? Plot, pride, gluttony, anger, covetousness, Yeah, I said it. Envy, sloth, and lust. I'm not going to say that word again. So with pride, you have to be there and be ready to compromise. Again, the ego has to be out of there. Stop laughing at me, Jen. I'm saying words as best I can. Gluttony is don't bite off more than you can chew. If you need help negotiating something, ask someone for help. It's too late after you made agreements and then talk to an agent and go, oh, do you think I should have done that? No, if you need help, ask for help. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Handle objections calmly. My son does this thing when I say something to him that he's upset with. He's 21 and he's funny. So every now and then I'll say something to him and he'll do just like this. Mama, I just needed to center myself before I respond to you. Okay, he does that to be funny and it helps him. It helps with that initial reaction of, are you crazy? To, okay, let me think about what you just said. Why would you have said that? How can I have misinterpreted it, right? So we need to just handle objections calmly. Prioritize wants and needs. I'm not saying that word again because Jennifer laughs at me. So we want to make sure that wants and needs are prioritized. What's the most important to your client? What's the second most important, the third, and that way? Because could a buyer be asking for a ton of closing costs just because they want it? Yes. Could a buyer have talked to mom who bought their house in 2007 and said, oh, my seller paid all my closing costs. Make sure your agent asks to get all your closing costs paid. Do you think that's happening right now in this market right now? Oh yeah, it is. It's happening. Still and now, with all the multiple offers happening, you still are going to have those buyers who are going to be like, yeah, I want to compete. And oh, by the way, ask for all my closing costs because somebody somewhere told them about that. So then you have to figure out what's a want and what's a need. Hey, Mr. Buyer, if you really want this property, for me to go in with my full negotiation powers, I need to know, is that money you're asking for a want for you or a need? Because if it's just a want, we're probably going to continue to lose houses. If it's a need, then I'm going to recommend you only ask for exactly what you need. And then we need to talk about, can we raise the price? Can we cut, do you need the cash? What did we need the cash for? Was there a specific something we needed the cash for that maybe they'll say to me, well, I know that AC needs to be replaced. Oh, okay. So instead of asking for 3% in closing, what if we ask the seller for a home warranty? Right? Because since you don't really need the money and that's not really going to help us in negotiation, what if we just asked for a home warranty since that's your biggest concern and the home warranty will cover that, right? So you need to know your negotiation power. Go ahead, Jen.
And this may be for now or maybe for another time. And if you can talk about looking at that from the other side. So as a listing agent, when you're getting a lot of these and they're asking for an astronomical amount of closing.
Yeah, we're
and being able to call that other agent and ask, because if I call they call and say, well, or is it a want or a need? Well, of course they're going to say it's a need. Oh yes, my buyer needs 3% in closing. So how do you look at that as a listing agent and that negotiation from the other side?
As a listing agent, if I have multiple offers, which is happening quite a bit now, and I have somebody asking for closing costs, I will always call the other agent and say, listen, we're in a multiple offer situation and I need to know right now, is that a want or a need? Because that's going to significantly impact my seller's decision. And that is clear enough for them to be like, let me check with my buyer, right? The other thing I'll do, because sometimes they don't know any better, is I'll call the lender, right? I'm not accepting offers without a pre-approval. I have the lender information right there. I'm calling them up. Before I even talk to that agent, I've already called to see if they're solid and ask the question to the lender. Now, any lender worth their salt won't tell me. And half of them do. So if the lender tells me, no, they have plenty in savings, I didn't write the pre-approval based on them having to have closing costs. Now I know it's a want, not a need. So now I want to know what the other agent's going to tell me. Right? All right, let's see. We already talked about those. I told you some of these I'm just going to zip through because they really don't apply. ZOPA, zone of possible agreement. There's multiple places where we can have overlapping agreement, and that's what we need to figure out. That's pretty much what we're talking about here. We have multiple terms in a contract, right? It's not just about the price, escrow, how much is going to be put down, is the closing date a place we can negotiate, is things that the buyer wants. I want everything I saw in the house just like I saw it, right? Where's our leverage? What can we negotiate? And where do we have mutual agreement? Sometimes the price is agreed on, but nothing else is agreed on, right? And then you have to work through those things. So these are just like, you know, what we already want. The seller wants to get the maximum amount possible, but generally they might set a limit for the least amount they're going to expect, and that's what we need to know. What is their walk away? The buyer, on the other hand, wants to pay the least amount, but may consider a higher amount if they need things like closing costs, right? Common sense dictates if there's no overlap and the buyer and seller, then we have to come together somehow. And the differences between these respective lows and highs of both seller and buyer are in their range of expectations, right? So when you set the expectation to your buyer or your seller that we're gonna work on a win-win, then they're more likely to compromise and to give and take when those expectations are set ahead of time. And that's why I have the conversation with them saying, listen, I tell them I'm a master negotiator, but I need to know what my limits are. And you're the only one who can answer that. So I need to know, what am I going after? Is this price, is your drop dead price? You know, do you care about, you don't care what we sell it for as long as it's cash and in 30 days, right? Are you gonna be okay with paying the fees that a VA loan needs? Because if not, then I need to, let's exclude those altogether, right? We need to know our negotiation power up front. And you should be having these conversations with your buyers and your sellers before you even write an offer, so that you know what they're expecting. We talked about leaving money on the table. We don't want anybody settling for too little or walking away from the table or settling for terms that are worse than their current situation. This is what's telling you 2 ears, 1 mouth. So we're gonna listen twice as hard as we talk when we're negotiating, because that's part of the problem too. If you're talking too much, you're not hearing the other side. You're not listening to what they want. They may be saying that their person needs something and you're not listening enough to know if there's another solution. I see that somebody raised their hand. Go ahead. Alexandria.
Oh, shoot, it did it. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't even know. Now I can't even see. I pressed something on my phone. But anyway, basically, I just want to quickly tell you, because it's over now. It was not over. I'm still under contract. But basically, I just kind of felt like I didn't do anything to negotiate because the seller didn't want to do anything. So, I mean, she did lower it, like, because it was listed for $155. She gave it to us for $153.5. And then, like, my buyer, he wanted, like, when the inspection was done, he wanted, like, all the repairs. So she was like, oh, no, I'm not doing any repairs, no repairs. I think she was, like, an investor because she only had the place for a year and she, like, redid everything. But she said, you know, nothing. I said, okay, well, can we just get the floor? Like, there's something wrong with the floor. Can we just do that? And like you said, the sliding glass door. She's like, no, I'm not. Basically, she wasn't doing anything. She was like, okay, does one or not? Because I have another offer for $154. So I just kind of felt like I was, like, you know, useless with negotiating.
I hear what you're saying. Sometimes your sellers are going to take negotiation power away from you. And so the way I deal with that is, again, we have these conversations up front, not when I get a contract. Up front is when I need to know what is my power. If they tell me I have no power, or they tell me we're listed at my max, I'm not doing repairs, I'm not doing anything, I will put that in the listing, right? Because I want to avoid all that. I'm going to put in the listing, price firm, seller is not interested in making any repairs. I'll put that in the realtor remarks, especially if you get a seller who doesn't want to pay the owner's title policy. I will put that in the list in the realtor remarks. You know, must have checked item B or whatever on the as-is contract. Seller is not paying any of these fees, because I want the other side to know what I'm empowered to do. So every now and then you are going to get a seller that withholds, and the best thing you can do is explain to them that your job is to negotiate on their behalf, and you need to know what kind of power you have for that. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's a little, and
Okay.
it's how you have that discussion with them. And the more experience you have, the more you'll know, right? As I'm listing a property, I leave with them a copy of the as-is contract and the standard contract. I explain the differences between the two, and I want them to see the contract so that when we get an offer, I'm not having to explain everything there. I highlight the places that somebody's going to fill in, the price, the terms, and I say to them, let's discuss these now so that when we get a contract or an offer in, you're not surprised or confused or asking me questions when time is of the essence, right? So I have all these expectations up front with them. And that's just what you learn to do. Money, circumstances, and things often prevent roadblocks, and that's this slide here. So for the buyer, money isn't the major consideration, but location is the priority. School distance from work, this becomes an area for negotiation, right? Maybe the buyer says, I'm willing to pay more. I need my kids in this school zone, right? Have you heard that before? Yeah. One set of clients absolutely positively has to do something by its particular time, but the other one's flexible, right? Has that ever happened? That becomes a zone of possible agreement too. And then here's examples of things. The buyer wants the wall-mounted TV, and the seller really doesn't want to take it anyway. So that's a win-win. That's something they both want. Buyer wants the bird bath. The seller's like, oh, good, because I didn't want to have to sell that. And the swing set, etc. So you try to find things that you're mutually agreeing on and use that in your negotiation. This is just a summary of what we talked about. So the options for negotiation, this is what we have now, right? In person, live, virtual, phone, email, and text. We already discussed you can't see body language or hear anything if you're only using phone and text. And you also need to know how your people want to be communicated with. My personal choice is always I call and ask, and I present the offer in person, right? Because I want to be able to explain everything to my client. Now, in this day and age, they prefer Zoom, but I will do that over an email, a text, and everything else because I want to see their face and see their emotion and see their response when I'm presenting the offer. That's going to tell me things that I can't get if I'm just virtual with or on the text. You also have to consider about who you're dealing with, right? Generational gaps. So I'm a phone person, right? I prefer to talk to somebody on the phone to see people face to face. Yet I'm dealing with a lot of agents who do everything text. And then what I'm always doing is following up afterwards with an email to commemorate what we talked about text or on the phone. But you need to know how your client and the other agent prefers to be communicated with because that's helpful in negotiations. Yeah, because people have bias depending on how you present things. This is talking about angry and your emotions, right? We don't want our emotions to get the best of us. And again, we have to know what our parameters are when we are negotiating. Oh, have any of you seen, I don't have it queued up and we're running out of time. I don't want to take up much of your time, but have any of you seen the movie Just Go With It? It's Jennifer Aniston and Adam Sandler. And there's a scene here in the movie with Jennifer Aniston has 2 kids in the movie, and Adam Sandler wants them to go on vacation with him because he's trying to impress this woman who thinks they're his kids. It's a long story. But he's negotiating with the children to have them go do this thing for him and pretend to be his kids. And the daughter wants acting classes. So it's funny how they negotiate in the beginning and he's saying, well, you should be happy with just the experience. And she's like, listen, you're the one lying. You need me more than I need you. And I need acting lessons and experience and this. And so they negotiate and it's pretty cool because you're watching how he realizes that her needs were not what he thought her needs were. And he really thought he was doing it you know, giving her money, which is what she wanted. And she's like, I don't want money. I want lessons, and I want this. And I want you to take my brother to Hawaii. And it's quite a funny scene. So anyway, watch that if you can.
It's on Netflix. I just looked it up.
It is. It's on Netflix. Okay. This is just, again, this is from the class. I'm not going to bore you with all this stuff. I'd really rather talk to you right now about actual situations. Here's a couple of strategies that dumb things people say in negotiation. And I've seen and heard this, so don't do this. I told the buyers that offer wouldn't work. Right? You don't want to say that to your sellers. We don't want to give the sellers any information about the buyers that are going to slant them. I made this mistake years ago. I had a seller and I was telling them everything that the buyer said, everything the buyer's agent said, and he wound up holding it against me later because I let him know that the other agent was being difficult. Right? That was on me. I was like, listen, she's really being unreasonable, but this is what we got. We're under contract, whatever. So one, the deal fell apart, right? Now that I've taken this course, I could have predicted that the deal was going to fall apart because the agents aren't getting along, right? And then what happened was later down the road, when we were having problems and they canceled the contract, he came to me and said, do you think they canceled because you and the agent can't get along? I took that hit. That was my fault. I let him see my crazy by trying to show him her crazy, and it backfired, right? So nothing. We tell them nothing about the other side, how we feel emotionally about them. Everything's professional. I can't give you a deal, but my broker can. Here's the offer, but they'll go higher, right? Here's seller. I talked to them, but they'll go higher. The buyers really, really love it. We can't wait to write the offer. I can do better than that. They need to buy or sell today. They're really desperate. They've already purchased a property. Okay, these are the things we don't say during negotiation. It's the difference between brilliance and stupidity. I didn't make that up. That's right there. Don't yell at me. Yeah, we don't need to talk about that. Tactics and techniques, you know, you have the silence, and here's the tip. Don't be the first one to talk. You present an offer, there it is. And you let the other side digest it and let them be the one that comes back. First one who talks loses. That's a hint for you when you go on a listing appointment. What's your commission? My commission is 6%. Silence. Let them talk first. Otherwise, you're already lost. That's the big tip there. The flinch, flaming, and I can give you guys these slides if you want this. This is just kind of telling you what these all mean. No may mean no right now. It could be yes later, right? How many times you're going to submit an offer and it's this particular price, and after the third one, your seller might say, okay, you know what? That seems to be the offer. Let's just go with this offer. So no may mean no in the beginning of the negotiation, but 2 or 3 contracts later, that could be a soft no. All right, so we need to know, again, what is it that our people want? Sounds. The use of sounds is a lot of fun. You know, people, what are you doing? You say something to somebody, they're like, okay, I got you. I understand. I raised teenagers. I know what that means. Right? Or it can be with a body language or whatever. So we need the nonverbal cues too. And so when we're in person, that's great. When we're on the Zooms, that's great because you get to see these nonverbals. That's why I like seeing your faces on the screen. And I need to know, are you paying attention? Are you engaged? Are you listening? Are you looking like this crowd right here? We know the types of nonverbal: posture, head movements, hand movements, this kind of stuff, facial, and then body language, right? We want to send the correct signals, and you want a poker face when you're presenting an offer, especially if you're presenting it to the other agent. You say, listen, my seller's counter at this, and you got to keep a straight face even if you think they're crazy or ridiculous. Everything has to be a poker face when you're negotiating. These are some positions that you kind of know, like, what does this typically mean when you see somebody doing this?
Stay away, not interested.
Yeah, they're angry, they're closed off, they're not interested. If they have their fists clenched, like, oh, I'm so angry. This could mean they're insecure or, not really sure, maybe a little nervous. So you want to be able to see body language, not just with the co-op, but with your clients, so you can actually read more than what they're saying to you. So here's what these all mean. Got a bunch of nervousness. This one's hostile, clenched fists. Cultural adjustments, we talked about that, right? Genders may not be viewed or treated as equal. So don't bring your bias to the table. You need to be able to read your clients and the other agent and be able to adapt so that you can have a good negotiation experience. Different cultures may have different expectations when bartering, right? And that's why I say that, because when I have clients that come from New York or down from Miami, they want to barter back and forth. They want to submit an offer 50,000 less and let's play this game. I need to know that about them before I go and negotiate on their behalf, because I need to be able to understand why they are asking me to do what they're doing and if I can, right? And then I can explain, well, in this market, we don't do that, right? Everything sells at 98%. That's a little aggressive and they may not respond to us, right? You have to be able to know. Dress, drink, and food can play a pivotal role. If you're negotiating with somebody on the other side that's a hot mess, what else might be a hot mess? Their paperwork, right? Is this going to be a smooth transaction? Am I going to have to constantly be after this person? They can't even dress themselves. How are they going to get a contract together, right? We need to know these things and at least be aware. This is a great book, Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands, that tells you the difference between cultures and how you can interact with them. I always say you should have a battle buddy. Should be of the opposite sex too, in case you are with somebody from another culture that, if I'm going in and speaking to anybody from the Middle East, for example, my husband takes the lead. He's going to take the lead on that because I already know their culture. They prefer to work with men. So I'm not going to fight that. That's not a battle I'm going to win. I would rather make it a smooth transaction and have somebody step in for me that can actually get the deal to go. So that's a great book. Yeah, I think a lot of these are just a bunch of extra stuff. So deadlock, we know how to deal with that. All right, so what I want to ask is, what are some of the things that you have out there? This is a good tactic, the what if. When you're negotiating and you're trying to see what the end result is for the other side, you say, okay, so what if my buyer came up to list price? What do you think your seller would then concede in concessions? Like, let's talk what if, let's talk hypothetical. You can get a lot done speaking in hypotheticals and maybe come to that meeting of the minds. So I did want to talk about that. Yeah, so what I want to talk about now is real life scenarios. What have you seen? What do you need advice on? What can we talk about? Or what do you want to talk about? Yes, you'll have access to these slides and the video will likely be on our Facebook page. Did I record it? Yes, I did. Look at me go. Anything out there, any life experiences or anything you need to know? I have a couple I can share, but I like to hear from other people. Nobody's negotiating? You look like, who is that over there? Who's that guy from Tool Time, Mr. Toolman Taylor? But only seeing this much of their head. Yeah, what was his name? Oh, I forget his name.
Tim?
No, not
the neighbor.
And the neighbor.
The
neighbor that you only saw this much of him. That's what Alexandria is doing right now. We only just see, and that's how Dorota is. Every time she's on Zoom, you only see this much of her. I forget what that guy's name is, but I always want to call her that. All right, sorry about that. Were you going to say something, Jen? You're going to share something?
I'll put myself out there. So yesterday we had a walkthrough and a closing, and I had out-of-town buyers that had literally driven overnight, had every ounce of belongings that they had in their truck out front. And they bought this house sight unseen. I mean, I did virtual showings with them. They actually found the house. So it wasn't anything that I sent them. They found it. We won they won the bid was several offers and an escalation clause. So they were thrilled. But when we got in, there was no washer dryer. And it was an as-is contract that I had written in, washer dryer and Ring doorbell. So no washer dryer. So there I was. They're out front. They're supposed to close in literally a half an hour. The wife literally had a virtual meeting at work at 1 o'clock. So we had a very limited time. And so I called the other agent and said, there's no washer dryer. We're not closing. So their response was, well, he'll go dig it out of storage, or we'll go to a used washer dryer place and we'll get it to you for X. Well, my clients didn't want that at all. They wanted, full price for new. We ended up, and we didn't want to take it out of, nobody could take it out of commission because we didn't, like I said, it had to close. So they ended up, we negotiated a gift card for them toward the purchase of the washer dryer. I still feel like, and I'm the armchair quarterback here thinking, what could I have done better for them the next day? But in hearing you talk about it, I was pretty limited in what we could do because it had to close. We couldn't delay, couldn't hold back. So I feel that they got something, but I don't think they feel that they got enough.
Yeah, now that
Coach away.
yeah, well, I mean, for your buyers, here's the thing. Our broker, I truly believe, would have said that agent just bought themselves a washer and dryer, right, for the client. Because,
Right.
hey, Gloria, because it is my class. Gloria's here. She'd like to say hi to everybody. Say hi. Hi. We're social distancing. You're going to be here for a bit. I'll come find you after. All right. So, in those scenarios, what happens is we get busy, right? We get these contracts, we're all excited, and a lot of us are gonna check the contracts on our little cell phone.
Mhm.
And I'm saying this because a very experienced agent learned this lesson, this exact lesson. She looked at the contract on her phone and never saw that the agent wrote in there washer and dryer, convey. Okay, so the same thing happened at closing. Washer and dryer's gone. Guess what that agent had to do? That agent bought a washer and dryer, and that was from our broker saying, guess what? You owe them a washer and dryer, and you need to make this right because it's your fault. You missed out. Now, in your case, you got them what they needed, right? They got the money for a washer and dryer. Could you have been happier? Yeah. Could it have gone smoother? Yeah. But the onus to this is on the other side. What I have tended to do now, because I'm in this position and see so many mistakes coming through, is when I ask for something that's not on the MLS, I will call the other agent and say, I just want to verify that you see we are asking for the washer, the dryer, the Ring doorbell, right? Is that my job? No, it's the other agent's job to read the contract. And I know that they don't do it, and I'm looking out for the best interest of my client. So I will pick up the phone. Now, sometimes I get the snooty tooty. I know how to read a contract. Okay, great. I'm so glad that you do. Many agents don't. And all I was doing was making sure that you saw this. But the majority of the time I get the, oh my God, I missed it. I didn't even see that. Thank you so much. My seller would have killed me. Right? Because sometimes what we try to do is let me just put it in there. Since the MLS says it doesn't convey, let me just put it in the contract. Well, now you're screwing with everybody. So just be open and honest about what you're asking, because let me ask you this, because that brought up this great question that I've gotten in the past. If the MLS says something conveys, is that a deal breaker? Like, does that mean anything?
No, it has to be in the contract.
It has to be in the contract. And don't ever write in the contract the personal items that convey. I've seen agents put per MLS. No, because can we go in and change the MLS every day if we wanted to? Yes, the MLS is not a binding contract. And I have a story about a buyer we had. They walk in the garage, they had those bike racks, that hang really nice, and the MLS said the garage has built-in shelves and a bike rack and made it all pretty and everything like that. And I never asked for it. I'm thinking it's attached, they're gonna leave it, everything's fine. And I was new, and my buyer, like a week before closing, said, Michelle, can you just verify they're gonna leave that? And I'm like, it's a fixed. It says it in the MLS that they're going to leave it. So, I mean, I'll ask, and I felt stupid, but I'm doing what my client told me to do. I asked, and guess what? She was like, no, the sellers want to take it. I said, well, you put it in the MLS. She's like, that you didn't ask for it in the contract. And we went back and forth. Now, luckily, the seller wound up saying, okay, we'll leave it. Otherwise, guess who was going to have to buy a bike rack? That was on me for not doing my job. So now everything goes in that contract. And I'm here to tell y'all, if you haven't read that as is contract, which most of you are going to be writing, it includes a bunch of things, okay? It's pre-printed for a few things. One of those things is a refrigerator. So if you're selling a house that doesn't have a refrigerator, it's on you to wind that out. Because if the buyer leaves it as it is and doesn't note that there was no refrigerator and you don't catch it, guess who's buying a refrigerator? Yeah. So here's another tip I'm going to give you about negotiation. This was a hard lesson and I just learned it, so I like to share. And some of you may have heard it before because, you know, I'm old lady repeats, so too bad. There we were at that $1 million listing I was telling you about, and we were about to have it under contract and have both sides of the deal in 4 days. Our first ever. This nice gentleman calls off the sign. He's pre-approved. Yes, let's get you in the house. We'd love to show it to you. And I go into the whole, hey, are you represented? No, I'm not represented. We like to go directly to the seller. Oh, really? Why is that? You know, because it doesn't cost you anything and blah, blah, blah. And you'd be represented. All this stuff spewing out of my mouth because I wasn't listening. I was just talking, right? So come to find out, he's very interested in the house. He has no agent. And can I write the offer? Yes, let's do that. So go home. He's emailing back and forth. I want to offer this, blah, blah, blah. He said, well, can you call me for a minute? Pick up the phone and call him, and he starts on the commission. Well, if you guys would lower your commission to 4%, you know, then, you know, we could work this deal out. And I went into defense mode, right? We work hard for our commission. My commission is not negotiating with you. You're the buyer. You know, I didn't feel like I needed to discuss with him what I have agreed with my seller. And so I said that. I said, I'm sorry, sir, my commission is not up for discussion. It's already predetermined with the seller. I said, however, there is some room that I have agreed with my seller that if I sold, you know, if I had both sides of the deal, you know, he does get some kind of a discount, but I can't discuss with you whether that's a 0.5%, a full percent, 2%, any percent, right? All I can say to you is submit your offer and let's see what we can do. He said, okay, thank you. 20 minutes later, he calls me and says, I just hired an agent since you said it's not going to be any different, and she'll be contacting you shortly.
Oh, no. Oh.
This was after we drove an hour to show the property, you know, because the listing agent must accompany, and sat there for 2.5 hours while he looked all at the house, and then talked to me back and forth for a couple of hours in the evening. How much time did I invest in that person? And now he's getting an agent. Whose fault was that? Oh yeah, this girl right here. So I call our broker. I'm like, Ginger, I showed the property. I spent all this time with this man, blah, 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 blah. And of course, you know, our broker has our back, and she's like, I hear you. Just, you know, get the deal done. Let the brokers figure it out afterwards. Just be the professional I know you are. And, you know, we think we have the showing cause, right? I was the cause for the sale. Okay. So I do all that. But then I know a broker who's been with a broker for 40 years, and she's with Keller Williams in Reston, a good family friend of mine. And she's really crabby, has been around the business for a really long time, and has a way of shooting me straight. So I call her and I tell her what happened, and I am just beside myself. Like, do you believe the nerve of this buyer trying to get me to talk to him about my commission? And she let me vent, and she said, okay. She said, well, there's 2 ways to handle it, and you definitely did it one way. And she said, now would you like me to tell you how I would have handled it? And I said, yes, please, I would love to know. She said, Michelle, that guy was begging you to make a deal, and you're a salesperson. Your response should have been, absolutely, let's write an offer and talk numbers right now. I should have never brought it to my commission. I should have brought it to, you want to write an offer? I need to sell this house. Let's see what we can do. Tell me the numbers you're talking about. Let me see what I can work with my seller. Without disclosing numbers, commission, any of that stuff, I should have had my I'm a salesperson hat on, and my first obligation was to who? My seller and getting that house sold. And instead, I made it about me. And that was my mistake. And I lost out on both two-siding a $1 million deal that I have to pay a referral fee on anyway. Now we're under contract. There's another agent involved, and I've learned my lesson. But it was a costly lesson. So please learn from me. Don't do what I do. Do what I say. And remember that we're always in negotiation. And don't take things personally. Always act on the best interest of your client, and you will likely get the outcome that you want. So any other questions about how, like in this market, we're having multiple offers. Any questions on how you negotiate through multiple offers? Jen said something that I want everybody to understand. That's a very great tool when you are negotiating for multiple offers. I know you look all surprised, but I taught you this before, so you already know. When you're trying to negotiate in a multiple offer situation, what is the one tool that you can use that will keep you in the running at the very least, if you know your negotiation power?
Are you looking for me to answer that?
Yeah,
Escalation clause?
there it is. Escalation clause. That will be your best friend in negotiations, especially if you have multiple offers. There's a Line Right Realty has trained their agents very well, and almost every offer I get from one of those agents will have an escalation clause so that they beat out any competition when they're writing offers. It's a great tool. We need to use that more often. And an escalation clause is in version now. If you just type in escalation, it'll pop up. And what it does is it gives you the ability to, it's kind of like bidding on eBay, right? You have a max bid, and it'll go in increments of whatever you say, $5, $10, $25. In real estate, we'll do it by hundreds of dollars, right? So let's say my buyer says, I want this property, it's listed at $225, and I say, well, it's gonna go into multiple offers, so what's the max? And they'll say to me, well, what does it comp at? Well, it comps at $235, it's actually underpriced. And they may say, okay, let's put an offer in at $225 with an escalation clause up to $235. This way, if somebody puts in an offer at $236, we automatically bump them in increments of $100. And that's how you can win a bid or get your client in the door.
The client I spoke about yesterday, they escalated to 285. They didn't have to go that far, but the other client had an escalation clause as well, but they stopped at 281. We got the house for 281.5.
Yeah. I mean, depending on how you write it, and again, your goal is whatever your buyer wants, right? If your buyer says, I want that house, and sometimes I don't think it's worth it. And I'll be like, okay, listen, we're going to do an escalation clause, but then we're also going to do an appraisal contingency because I don't want you to overpay. So let's get the bid, but we're putting them on notice that this house must appraise or we're going to walk, right? So there are ways that you can negotiate on behalf of your buyer or your seller, and we have tools to help you with that. Somebody's hands up.
Me.
Me. Go ahead, Trouble.
I don't know if my name shows up. It should show up on there. I don't know. I'm on my phone, so I don't know.
It shows up Alexandria Miller.
Yes. Okay. So I had a buyer that I'm under contract with, and basically the house was listed for $255, and she was like, and she had an FHA loan, but they said they're not accepting an FHA loan. But we went ahead and offered. She was like, well, I want to offer $260. So I was like, okay. So even though we had an FHA loan, we offered $260, and they actually ended up accepting it because they did have multiple offers on it, but they were like, we've accepted it because you offered more than what the listing price was. And mind you, it did appraise. I thought it wasn't. I was scared. I was having nightmares like, oh my gosh, it's not going to appraise for that amount, but it actually did. So, but was that like the right thing to do in that case?
Did your buyer want the house?
Yes.
Were they willing to pay whatever the appraised value came in at?
Yes.
See, what you have to understand is why, you have to know why the other side doesn't want a certain loan.
Okay.
With FHA, usually I'd say 80% of the people on FHA are either first-time home buyers or something happened in their history that they need a little extra help, because the FHA is a loan where they only have to put 3.5% down.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, people that qualify for an FHA loan do not have a lot of money in reserves and oftentimes need help with closing costs. That's the stigma around an FHA. This is why a seller will likely say, I don't want to deal with FHA, because they're going to ask for closing costs. And, you know, there are things that in an FHA loan, appraisers may say must be fixed, that a seller, you know, would have to do if they want to sell to an FHA. So the way that you circumvent that is, in my opinion, is not to say, let's not take FHA, because that will eliminate like 75% of the buyers out there. If the problem is closing costs, we can identify that, and not all FHA people need closing costs. Some of them are very well qualified. They have plenty in their savings and they don't need the help. So in your case, that was absolutely the right thing to do. What wouldn't have made sense is if you put the offer in at 260 and then also asked for 6% in closing costs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right? Because what we have to remember when we're negotiating is it's got to be a win-win. So what's the bottom line going to the seller? And I always explain that to the buyer. I'm like, Mr. Buyer, you know, if this is listed at 200 and you're offering them 200, but then asking for 5% in closing costs, that's really not an offer for 200,000. And I'll do a net sheet to show them, because sometimes they don't think that way. And then I'll say, how can we make this a win-win? Or how can I increase my negotiation power if I'm going in there already undercutting and we're competing with conventional loans that are coming in at list price, right? So you have to educate your buyer as well to know what they can get away with. The other negotiation tactic, when you're dealing with people who need closing costs, I'm not saying people won't accept it, because there's a human element, and don't underestimate the power of emotion, because emotion makes you, because logic makes you think and emotion makes you act. Okay? When you're dealing with somebody who has strikes against them, the best thing you can do to represent them is, one, know your negotiation power. Know if they're asking for wants or needs, and explain that up front. I understand you want this cash. If you want this house, we need to not ask for something that's a want. We need to only ask for what's a need. And number two, have them write a letter. Have them write a letter, take a picture of their family, whatever you pull on those heartstrings. Because I'm here to tell you, sellers, they're all the gambit, right? I had sellers that overlooked high offers because they saw the single mom with the baby who went to look at the house because they sat at the neighbor's house looking. And then they tell me, I want that lady with the single mom. I want to sell the house to her. Well, her offer, she's FHA. She's like, I don't care. I saw she's a single mom. She's got a beautiful baby. Those are the people I want to sell it to. There are people who they want to sell their home to a family they feel is going to love their home, right? And how are they going to know that if they don't have a letter or something from that buyer? So that works. And you can even appeal to them and say, listen, this is the fourth house my buyer wanted, except with yours, they see a future. They see this, that, you know, you want to tell that other agent, listen, we are strong buyers. They're very interested and they really are going to go through the end, but this is what they're dealing with and they need somebody to catch them a break. We're obligated to forward that to our sellers or our buyers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you are definitely right about that. I did actually have her write a letter, and obviously we came in like 5,000 more than listing. So, and they did say, you know, we really love the letter. We really want to give her this house. So, I mean, and it was the FHA. So it seems to be going good.
You have to do whatever it is, whatever edge you can get, you need to work with that. So especially if your buyers or sellers have a story, I had a military couple. They took a picture in front of a flag and they gave me their whole song and dance. This is going to be the first house they actually get to call a home, the whole bit. And my seller was practically in tears and said, that's the one I want. I'm like, this is not the best offer. And they're like, I don't care. That's the one I want. All right, you got it. So don't underestimate emotion. Emotion makes them act. So you want to be able to negotiate that if you can.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank
And
you.
so the other thing I wanted to say is don't get stuck on the list price either. If it's multiple offers, I can guarantee you if I get 8 offers on a property and I tell everybody it's multiple offers, I need your highest and best, they're all going to come in at list. Now I always price my homes at market value. So I know I have a little bit of leverage. Like if we go over list price, that it's possible it's going to appraise. So I'm looking for those people who are willing to go above list price. They're the ones that wind up winning the offer. If everybody just goes up to list price, then you just have a bunch of the same offers. Now you're comparing terms, right? That's why I do an escalation clause, and that's why I'll do it above list price and ask my buyer, what's your tolerance? How high are you willing to go to get this property? Because everybody else is going to come in right at list price. I had 8 offers, 5 of them right at list price. I had 3 that were smart enough to go $1 or $10 over, and 1 smart enough to do an escalation clause. So that's the one that got it because all the other terms and conditions were the same. I knew it was going to appraise. It was the best loan for my seller. All right. Any other questions I can answer? No? All right. Was this useful to you?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Good.
Very
I'm
great
glad.
class.
Okay, I'm going to post the recording and the slides on our KWTP Agents and Staff Facebook page. If you're not in our market center and you need that, please email me at Michelle with 2 L's, Michelle.Moreno, Moreno, at kw.com, and I will send them to you. All right, you guys have a great rest of your day. Go out there and negotiate your tails off.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.